And we are back live with another Between the Pages book chat. And today, our guest author is Abigail Manning, and we're here to talk about her fantasy romance fairy tale retelling, Poisoned Heart, a retelling of Snow White. So I'm going to let her introduce herself now. So take it away. And she's slightly frozen. We're getting video problems. Yeah, the video is frozen.
Oh no. Okay, I think I'm back.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you are back. Okay, so we can commence with the introductions on your part now.
Okay, perfect. Hi, my name is Abigail Manning, and as you said, I am a fantasy romance author. I've written the Emerald Realm series, which is a collection of fairy tale retellings. Also, I'm working on the Ruby Realm series, which is an extension of the Emerald Realm series. And today I have my first book with me, which is called Poisoned Heart, and it is a retelling of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. That's kind of what I do. Is I'm a big fairy tale fan. I've got some series in progress, and I've got a Kindle Vella that I just started, and that's kind of my genre.
Okay, great. So tell us about the Poisoned Heart. What's it about other than Snow
So
White?
yes. So Poison Heart is about a girl named Princess Arabella, and she is honestly really spoiled to start off the book. She's not your typical, like, I'm completely innocent, naive Snow White. She's very spoiled because she's the most beautiful, and everybody tells her that, so she knows it. And her life changes when a sudden knight coaxes her out of her home and then turns out to be an assassin who's sent to kill her, but decides to have a little bit of fun and sends her basically on a deadly game of hide and seek where he says that she has 48 hours or 24 hours to escape her and 2 weeks to survive before he comes and tries to. Well, he'll spend those 2 weeks trying to kill her. So she has 2 weeks to remain hidden and survive, or else she's going to be killed. So she ends up finding refuge in a laundry mill with 7 other mill workers, and she lives with these women and tries to hide her identity while also having to humble herself and learning how to work for her living and not be so spoiled. So it's kind of a humility story, a redemption story for her, and also just a fun like assassin hide and seek.
Okay, so obviously the fairy tale was the inspiration for the book, but what other inspirations did you draw from?
There was a lot of inspirations for this book. I think one of the funniest ones is it was actually an anime that got me into it. It was one called Princess Principal, and there was one specific episode where the characters go to a laundry mill and they kind of help out the women in the laundry mill and they help them repair a bunch of stuff that's broken. And it was a really cute episode. It's actually like it's a spy show. So if you're into spies, it's steampunk. It was really cute. And I remember that episode when I was writing this, and I loved the idea and the imagery of a laundry mill. And I wanted to like incorporate that somehow. And so it was really fun to put into a fairy tale. And there's also something else about the laundry mill that like squeezes in the fairy tale. And I don't want to spoil it, but it has to do with the whole, like poisoned apple situation. So that one, it fits in really smoothly with that. And so that was probably one of the biggest inspirations. And then honestly, just other fairy tale retellings that I read. Things from Camille Peters or Kenley Davidson, Melanie Sellier. They were definitely a big inspiration for this book too.
Okay, great. So tell us a little bit about the Snow White character, the what's she like? I mean, you mentioned she was spoiled, but what else stands out about her personality?
Okay, I think you came back. Sorry. I think I lost you again. You asked
Okay,
about the
I
Snow
was
White
going to say,
character, right?
yeah,
Okay, perfect. Yeah,
tell
so
us
the
about her
Snow White.
personality.
Perfect. So yeah, her name is Arabella, and Arabella actually means air and beauty all in the same word. So it's like the wind changes, so her beauty changes, where it changes first from her just being exterior beauty, like her exterior beauty, to being inwardly beautiful. So she's very spoiled at the start of the book. She's pretty snobbish. She's not, she's a very spoiled princess who knows that she's beautiful and gets what she wants. And throughout the story, as she is, completely thrown out of her comfort zone and she's, forced out into the snow and has to go find a way to survive, she becomes very timid and shy because she no longer knows where she is. She has to take on a fake name, and she kind of learns how to appreciate the people around her. And she also meets her love interest, who is a captain of the guard who is sent out to hunt for the original princess. So she kind of also learns to like open up to people and learn who she can trust without, having to rely on her authority as a princess. So she changes a lot throughout the story. So you won't like her at first, but I promise she gets better.
Okay, so what about the setting? Is this set in like sort of a fantasy style real world based on our history, or is this a totally new fantasy setting?
It's a fairly new fantasy setting with some real inspiration. This one kind of has British Victorian inspirations into it, but it is still overall fantasy. The kingdom is called Azala, and it's set in the Emerald Realm, which has four kingdoms total. And in this specific story, it's mostly set around the capital of Azala and kind of that whole system. And the inspirations that are kind of more realistic are like their dress and their speech and things like that. In the more magical ones is that there is actually a magic system where there are enchanters, casters, and sorceresses or sorcerers. And enchanters can cast magic into non-living things. Casters can chant things into living things, and sorcerers can cast magic into themselves. So there's kind of a hierarchy of power, and you meet a couple of mages who have these certain powers in the book that play a realm, and both this book and later on in the series too. So that's kind of the magical element that's twisted into the realistic parts of things.
Cool. So you said it was based on Victorian. So is this more of a is there more technology in the world, or is it, your basic sword and magic sort of deal?
It's pretty basic sort of magic. There's no it's not like steampunky or anything like that where they have like a lot of machinery. It's pretty cut and dry in terms of like kind of like late Victorian where it's definitely more carriages and horse drawn everything and everything's just kind of run a lot more manually. So it's definitely more simplistic in that way.
Cool. So you mentioned the assassin, whom I'm assuming is at least one of the antagonists, or the main antagonist. So tell us a little bit about that, without spoilers.
Yeah, so the assassin definitely is probably the most known antagonist, but there's also a king who is kind of the hierarchy antagonist, and you meet him in the prologue because he's the one who sends the assassin. And so he's kind of like the guy in the chair, like the guy in the background who you overall fear, and the assassin's kind of his henchman. So you have more interactions with the assassin, but the king is the kind of overarching villain, and he carries on throughout the entire series. So he is kind of what connects all five books in this series. Is he doesn't get defeated until the very end.
Okay. So the way you described the assassin in the beginning, it sounded like he was a bit arrogant. I mean, playing games with the person he was contracted to kill. So does that come back to bite him in
A little bit. He's very sly. He's very tricky. So he kind of always has an ulterior motive. And again, I don't want to spoil too much, but he isn't trying to rush into killing her, and there's a reason for that that you find out later along the line. But he has, again, ulterior motives. So he's definitely kind of like playing it up to like be intimidating to get what he wants out of Arabella, but at the same time, he's also got something else in the background. And he also carries on throughout the series. He's actually the main protagonist in the fifth book. So he's kind of one of those characters where it's like he seems shallow at first and just arrogant, but the more you learn about him, the more you realize that there's more going on behind just his mask.
Oh, that's interesting, turning an antagonist into the protagonist later in the series.
It's one of my favorite things.
Okay, so what was the hardest scene for you to write, or type of scene for you to write in the book?
I think for me, it was definitely the stuff at the beginning of the book with Arabella when she's really snobbish and really rude. Because I like to think that, like, when you get in the head of a character, you would like to make that character feel or sound a little bit like you when you're first writing a book. And that's definitely hard when the character is intentionally really rude and very, harsh. So I think that was probably the hardest part writing because this was my first book. And so writing a character that I didn't like for a while, and like, again, she gets better, but when you're starting off that way, it was difficult to like enjoy that and difficult to feel like it was working. But like when you go back and look at it, like, no, she's unlikable and she's meant to be that way because people don't always start off as, perfect and likable.
Mm, very true. So, what was your favorite scene or type of scene that you wrote in the book?
Oh my goodness. I definitely think all the scenes with the laundry mill workers. So they're basically the seven dwarves, but they're women. And so they all kind of have personalities off the seven dwarves. So there's Glenda, and she's the grouch of the group. She's the old lady who, takes no business, and she's kind of the grumpy. Or you've got Sylvia, who she's kind of the sneezy, so she gets sick often. And there was Hazel, who's happy. So she's all bubbly, and she's like a 16-year-old who's just happy to be alive. And their interactions were always my favorite because it was really fun to like pull from those inspirations and like develop those characters off of just a really bland personality trait and just kind of make them come alive. So their dialogue was absolutely some of my favorite.
Okay, so you've mentioned the some of the secondary characters, but do any of the secondary characters steal the scenes away from the protagonist?
I think it's possible. So in my second book, actually, which is a Goldilocks retelling, which I have right here, the main character Aurelia is also a secondary character in this book, and she is once again very bubbly, has a huge personality, and she interacts with Arabella. And I definitely think she steals the scene in some cases. She's very vibrant. She's very like she's a noble lady, doesn't want to be a noble lady, and is 16 and just wants to show the world what she wants.
Cool. So, have any of the readers commented on any of the secondary characters being their favorites?
I think so. I think a lot of people have loved Aurelia, who was in the second book. A lot of people have loved Hazel, who is the happy character, and a lot of people have really been interested in the assassin as well, who is the creepy sly guy who comes back later too. And so even before the other books came out and you learned more about them, I think a lot of people like them, especially in the beginning when Arabella is less likable.
Okay. So, what are your characters afraid of?
I would definitely say Arabella is mostly just afraid of, for her life because it's very much a survival situation for her. It's pretty much if she doesn't, stay hidden, then she's going to get killed. And even worse off, hears that her mother might be being tricked into a marriage while she's gone. So she's worried for her kingdom's sake because she believes the king who's trying to marry her is the king who sent the assassin. So there's definitely like her kingdom is on the line, her life is on the line. So she's afraid for both at first herself, and then as she kind of humbles herself, she kind of abandons protecting herself to protect her kingdom. So she definitely fears more for her kingdom at that point.
Okay. So, which of your characters would you like to hang out with in real life?
Oh, probably any of the dwarf millmaid ladies for sure. They're just a fun group.
Okay. So, tell us a little bit more about the rest of the series.
Yeah, so as I said, the second book is the Goldilocks retelling, and that one is about Aurelia, who is the secondary character in the first book. And that one is about a young woman who is Aurelia, who, as soon as she turns 16, is forced into an arranged marriage, and she doesn't want to do that. So she runs away from home and hides in an abandoned manor to find three guests who are still living there. And then I have a Cinderella retelling called Framed in Florals, and that one's basically if Cinderella went to the ball and got framed for murder. So that one's fun.
Oh, I like that idea.
I do too. It's also very romantic, believe it or not. It's very sweet. And then I have a Thumbelina retelling, which is about a girl who is suspected of being a long lost princess to an abandoned kingdom, and she wants nothing to do with all these men. But suddenly, all these men want to marry her because they think she comes with a kingdom. So that one is also very fun. And then the last one in the series is a Rapunzel retelling called Towering Future. And that one deals with the big bad king that kind of trails through the entire series. And he's basically her jailer in the situation. She can see the future. And so he traps her in a tower to basically use her as a crystal ball. So that's kind of her escape story and her love story with the assassin in the first book.
All right. So, one of our viewers likes the Cinderella being framed for murder idea too.
Me too. It's got a lot of flower themes too.
Okay. So, you obviously write fairy tale fantasy. Are there any other genres that you've ever considered writing in?
So it's mostly fairy tales, but I did recently, I guess, kind of branch out. I did a fairy tale Greek mythology mashup, which is currently live on Kindle Vella. It's called The Soulless Slipper, soulless spelled like your soul, not like a shoe. And it's a mashup between Cinderella and Persephone and Hades. And it's a very different world and it's a different take on things. And that one is currently on Kindle Vella. So you can read the first three chapters free, or it's eventually going to be a book, but right now it's coming out episodically. And so that one's kind of my newest endeavor. And I am planning to branch out of fairy tales, but right now it's what I'm passionate about. So I'll get there, but I'm really enjoying where I am now.
All right. So, do you have anything planned out upcoming for the Emerald Realm series?
So the Emerald Realm series is complete, but how did you know I have all these books here? I have a follow-up series, which is the Ruby Realm, which is basically just a continuation of the Emerald Realm series. You don't have to read the Emerald Realm to read the Ruby Realm. And the first book, this is actually already out yet, is a Red Riding Hood retelling. And so I have that, which basically it's still fairy tale retellings, but they kind of start fresh with a new realm with only one character who comes back, and they're a little bit darker than the first book. They're all still clean, but they have a little more suspense and a little more eeriness. So in this one, it's Little Red Riding Hood, but if she was kidnapped and is trying to get back to Granny before it's too late.
Interesting. I like that take on Red Riding Hood. So I think we'll wrap it up here for the interview and just let you tell everyone where they can find you and your books.
Yeah, so you can find all of my books and everything at my website, abigailmanningauthor.com. I'm also on every social media at Abigail Manning Author, so TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, you can find me there too.
Okay, and I have her website linked in the description as well as the Poison Heart book, so you can check it out. And I'd like to thank you for being our guest. It was a pleasure chatting with you, and the series sounds wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, and be sure to join us next weekend for another episode. And that's all for now. Bye.